Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making white kimchi. Let's start by making a brine. In a large bowl, I'm adding 3/4 of a cup of kosher salt and 4 cups of water. We're giving this a really good stir to make sure that salt dissolves. And I actually doubled up on this recipe because my cabbage was so large. So you need 1 head of Napa cabbage. We need to cut this into quarters, leaving that core end on because we want each of our segments to stay together. You also want to remove any of the outer leaves that aren't as vibrant and are if they're a little brown or wilted, you just want to remove those and take them off. So now we're going to salt the white stalks of our cabbage. This is going to help tenderize it a little bit more because it is a little more hardy than our leafy greens. And I'm going to put 2/4 into 1 bowl. And we're going to let this brine for an hour and a half, but going in and flipping every 30 minutes, just so each part of this cabbage gets touched by that brine. I like to weight these down with a little bowl full of water, just to make sure everything gets submerged. And if this tends to spill, then no harm, no foul, it's just extra water in your brine. So once your stalks are flexible, you want to give this a really good rinse to rinse off any excess salt. And then I like to put them on a cooling rack, propped up at an angle with the leaves facing down to get that water drain out even more. While that's draining, we can work on the kimchi brine itself. So to a bowl, I'm adding in 1 tablespoon of kosher salt and 4 cups of water. Giving this a little stir to dissolve that salt. And to flavor this, we have 1 small yellow onion. Just giving this a nice rough choppity chop because we are going to blend this up. White kimchi is very different than red kimchi. It's a little easier to make. It's less ingredients. You don't need as much equipment. So I wanted to tackle this one since I've never made kimchi before I tackled a red kimchi. We also need 2 inches of ginger. Giving this a rough chop as well because ginger is a little fibrous. I want to give a little hand to my blender or food processor. 2 cloves of garlic, just chopping these in half. Then for a little sweetness and fruitiness, we're going to use half of a red apple. Just giving this a rough choppity chop into chunks and removing any of the core and seeds that are left. That other half of an apple you can snack on. For more fruitiness, I'm adding in half of an Asian pear. If you can't find Asian pear, just substitute this with that other half of red apple. But we're doing the same thing, just rough chopping, taking out the core and the seeds. I do have to tell you, that other half of Asian pear I sprinkled with a little salt. I know that sounds weird, but it brings out that inherent sweetness. Now we're going to blitz this up until we get a nice smooth blend. And I'm using a nut milk bag, but you can use a cheesecloth or a strainer if you don't have cheesecloth. We're going to tip all of the solids into this. We're going to tie this up and let this steep almost like a tea. While that's steeping, we can work on the rest of our ingredients. These are jujube berries. They're rich in antioxidants. You can get them dried in the Asian food store or online. They do have a pit, so you want to run your knife around like an avocado, remove that pit, and then we're just going to chop these up into nice thin slices. We also need 1 tablespoon of pine nuts, a handful of chives. I'm just going to chop these into thirds. There are no exact measurements to this. It really depends on how much kimchi you're making and how big your cabbage is. I used a little over half of this carrot, just cutting this on the bias into planks and then into matchsticks. And then cutting those in half if they're a little long. We also need a little daikon radish. This is going to add a little crunchiness as well as a little heat, as radishes tend to be a little spicy. Just cutting those into planks and then into matchsticks as well. And last but not least, we need half of a bell pepper. Now you want to mix all these ingredients until everything is well distributed, because now we're going to start filling our cabbage leaves. So take 1/4 of your cabbage, start from the bottom, and just layer in all of those filling ingredients between each of the leaves, and you can add as much or as little as you like. Once these are all filled up, we're going to gather this up and we're going to place this face side down into a container that has a lid. I am using a fermentation container. This is meant for kimchi. If you don't have that, just use a lidded container. Glass or BPA-free plastic, preferably. So just continue on with all of your little quarters and place them into your container. And now we can squeeze out as much of that flavorful goodness from our little bag here. If any of those solids happen to get into your brine, that's perfectly fine. Now we're going to pour this over our cabbage. And the reason I like this container, it comes with this vacuum sealed little topper that you press on top. You want to let this sit on the counter for 24 hours, and then you're going to pop this in the fridge and let this ferment for at least 7 days. So now, full disclosure, I only waited 4 days because I was impatient and I wanted to see how this was turning out. And it hadn't hit that full fermentation yet, so I do encourage you to be patient and wait the 7 days so you get that nice effervescence to it. Now let's go ahead and give this a taste. This is absolutely refreshing. You get that effervescence from the fermentation, a little bit of that fruitiness from the jujube berry and the apple and the pear. You get the spiciness, it's a subtle spiciness from that radish and all that gorgeous crunch from these vegetables. You can serve this with just about anything. It is absolutely delightful and delicious. I'm so glad you came on this kimchi journey with me. But there it is, white kimchi. I hope you all try to make this. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Thank you again, and until next time, happy cooking.